I grew up in a tight, noisy apartment in Queens, the kind where you can hear the neighbors arguing through the walls and the subway rattling 2 blocks away. My name's Mia Torres, and I shared that space with my older sister, Ava, 4 years my senior and the undisputed star of our family. Mom was a cashier at a bodega chain that popped up after the 2020s retail boom, and Dad drove a delivery van for one of those drone-assisted startups that clogged the skies by 2025. We weren't broke, but we weren't flush either. Just another Latino family grinding it out in Jackson Heights. Except in our house, Ava was the sun, and I was the shadow. They called her their miracle girl. Mom would gush about Ava's every move. Her crooked drawings from pre-K, her C-average report cards, the way she'd twirl around the living room like she owned it. "She's special," Dad would say, nodding like it was gospel. Me, I was the oops baby, the one they didn't plan for, the one who got a pat on the head if I was lucky. Ava soaked it up, and they gave her everything, a bubble they built around her, leaving me on the outside, scrapping for crumbs. It wasn't just praise. They believed her, always. If Ava said I broke her toy drone, even if I was across the room when it crashed, I'd get grounded, no questions asked. "Mia, you need to be careful," Mom would scold, while Ava smirked behind her. But when Ava accidentally spilled paint on my school project, a 3D printed model I'd spent weeks on for a science fair, Dad just shrugged. "She didn't mean it," he said, even though I'd seen her grinning as the red goo wrecked my work. Evidence didn't matter when it was me. Her word was gold. Birthdays were the worst. Mine's in June, Ava's in March, but you'd think we shared a date the way they catered to her. Every year, I'd blow out candles on a cake I didn't pick, always vanilla with sprinkles. Ava's favorite, never the chocolate I begged for. "It's easier this way," Mom would say, like my taste didn't count. Gifts? Ava got the shiny stuff, new AR goggles, a hoverboard she barely used, while I'd unwrap socks or a hand-me-down tablet with a cracked screen. One year, I turned 10, and they planned a family trip to Coney Island. Except it was all Ava's show. She picked the rides, the food, even dragged us to some overpriced VR arcade she'd seen on X. I spent the day trailing behind, clutching a melted ice cream she'd shared after licking half of it. They'd bend over backwards for her. When Ava wanted to join a dance class in Flushing, they scraped together the fees, bragging about her talent, even though she quit after 3 weeks. I asked for art supplies once, nothing fancy, just markers and a sketchbook, and got a lecture about stretching the budget. "Ava's got big dreams," Dad said. "Like mine didn't exist. I'd doodle on scrap paper instead, hiding my stuff under my bed so she wouldn't trash it out of spite." It wasn't subtle, and I wasn't blind. By the time I was 8, I knew the score. Ava could cry her way out of anything. Spilled juice on the couch, a missing $20 from Mum's purse, and they'd hug her, say she'd learn. Me, I'd get the 3rd degree for forgetting to lock the door, even if nothing was stolen. "You've got to be responsible, Mia," Mom would snap, while Ava lounged on her phone, scrolling X posts about whatever influencer she worshipped that week. The rules didn't apply to her, and they made sure I felt it. The unfairness stung. But I was too small to fight back then. I'd retreat to my corner of our shared room, her posters plastered over my side, her junk spilling onto my bed, and try to tune it out. Outside, New York buzzed on, drones whirring, horns blaring, but inside, it was Ava's world. Mom and Dad didn't see me, not really. I was the quiet one, the accident they hadn't meant to have, stuck in the orbit of their golden child. But even at that age, I knew it wouldn't last forever. Someday, I'd find a way to make them see me, or make them wish they had. For years, Ava mostly ignored me. I was the annoying little sister, a background noise she could tune out while she preened in Mom and Dad's spotlight. We'd coexist in our queen's shoebox, her hogging the bathroom mirror, me dodging her messes, like two planets on different orbits. But that changed when we hit our teens. I was 13, just starting at a middle school in Jackson Heights, and Ava was 17, a junior at a high school in Flushing. Something snapped in her then, and I became her target. It started after she lost her crew. I never got the full story. Maybe they ditched her when she transferred schools after a fight, or maybe her princess act finally wore thin. Either way, her ex-posts went from group selfies to solo shots, her captions dripping with vague angst. She'd stalk the apartment, sulking, and Mom would coo, "She's just finding herself." Meanwhile, I was finding my footing at school. I wasn't a star, but I had friends, kids who liked my sketches, laughed at my jokes, invited me to hang at the bodega after class. Ava hated it. I could see it in her eyes, the way they narrowed when I'd come home chatting on my cracked phone about some dumb prank we'd pulled. She didn't just stew, she struck. It started small. She'd borrow my stuff, pens, hoodies, even my earbuds, and return them trashed or not at all. Then it got meaner. She'd accuse me of things I didn't do, stealing her vape pen, spreading rumors, and run to Mom and Dad with crocodile tears. They'd buy it every time. "Mia, why can't you leave her alone?" Dad would growl, while Mom clutched Ava like she'd been wounded. No proof, no questions, just punishment. I'd lose phone privileges or get stuck scrubbing dishes, while Ava smirked from the couch, scrolling X like she'd won a war. The big blow came when she went after my friends. I'd started hanging with a tight group, Jade, Carlos, a few others, kids who didn't care about Ava's drama. She couldn't stand that I had something she didn't. One day, she told Mom I'd been sneaking out with them, claimed we were vaping behind the school, ironic since she was the one puffing clouds in her room. Total lie, but Mom and Dad swallowed it. "No more friends," Mom declared, grounding me for a month. "They're a bad influence." I tried to argue. Jade's mom even called to vouch for us, but Dad just waved it off. Ava wouldn't make this up. It backfired, though. Word spread beyond our walls. At a family barbecue in Corona, cousins, tios, the whole crew, I let it slip. We were crowded around a folding table, eating arroz con pollo, when my cousin Sophia asked why I'd been MIA. Mom and Dad banned my friends because Ava's jealous she doesn't have any, I blurted, too mad to filter. The table went quiet, then erupted. Sophia's mum, Tia Rosa, lit into my parents right there. "You're punishing Mia for Ava's tantrums. ¿Qué mierda es esa?" Others chimed in. Primo Luis, even quiet Tio Manny, calling out the favoritism they'd all seen for years. Mom's face turned red, Dad stared at his plate, and Ava stormed off, slamming the gate. They couldn't ignore it after that. The family's heat, plus a few ex-posts from Sophia that went viral in our circle, forced their hand. A week later, Mom muttered something about overreacting and let me see my friends again. No apology, just a grudging nod. Ava didn't let up, though. She'd hiss insults when they weren't around. Loser, wannabe, and glare at me like I'd stolen her crown. I didn't care. I had Jade and Carlos, a sketchbook full of ideas, and a tiny crack in the wall Mom and Dad had built around her. School became my escape. Graffiti-covered halls, glitchy hollow boards, a slice of New York where I wasn't just Ava's punching bag. She'd ramped up from neglect to full-on bully, but I wasn't invisible anymore. The family saw it. My friends had my back. And even if Mum and Dad stayed blind, I'd tasted freedom. Ava could rage all she wanted. Her throne was wobbling, and I wasn't going to let her knock me down again. High school should have been my breakout. I was 15, a freshman at a public school in Jackson Heights, finally carving out a space that wasn't Ava's shadow. I had my crew, Jade, Carlos, a few others, and a knack for art that got me noticed in class. But Ava wasn't done with me. She'd transferred to a different school in Elmhurst after her Flushing drama, claiming it was to start fresh. But the real fresh start she wanted was making my life hell. Distance didn't stop her. She turned our apartment into her battleground. She'd bring her new friends over, loud, edgy types with dyed hair and knock-off AR glasses, the kind who'd blast music off cheap hollow speakers and trash the place. They'd mess with me while Mum and Dad were at work, shoving me into my room, dumping my sketchbooks on the floor, once even smashing a drone model I'd built for a tech fair. Ava egged them on, laughing like it was a game. "Just kidding around," she'd say if I complained. Mom and Dad ate it up when they got home. "They're just teasing Mia," Mom would sigh, wiping down the counter like it was my fault. "Don't be so sensitive." Dad wouldn't even look up from his phone. Scrolling was his shield. It got worse when I started dating. First was Ryan, a shy kid from my art class who liked my doodles and didn't mind my quiet streak. We'd hang out at Flushing Meadows, sketching by the Unisphere, or grabbing cheap empanadas. Ava sniffed it out fast. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen, smirking. Saw Ryan at the park. He was all over me. Guess he's into real girls. Total lie, but she ran with it. Next day, she told Mom and Dad he'd hit on her at some bodega, tears and all. They banned him from the house, grounded me for bringing trouble home. Ryan dumped me a week later, couldn't handle the drama. Then came Leo, junior year. He was tougher, a skater from Corona who didn't scare easy. We'd sneak off to rooftops, tagging walls with spray cans, kissing under the drone-filled sky. Ava tried the same trick. Flirted with him when he picked me up once, then spun a story about him begging her to ditch me. Mom and Dad bought it again. "He's no good, Mia," Dad grunted, locking the door. "Stay away." Leo stuck it out longer, but the constant fights, me sneaking out, them calling him trash, wore him down. He bailed too. 2 relationships, 2 wrecks, all because Ava couldn't stand me having something she didn't. She didn't stop there. Senior year, she dragged home her own boyfriend, some wannabe DJ named Tyler, all flash and no substance. He'd spin tracks on a busted holodeck in our living room, and Mom and Dad fawned over him like he was a prodigy. "He's got ambition," Mom cooed, plating him extra arroz. "Ava's got a good eye." Tyler dumped her 6 months later, ghosted her on X, left her sobbing, and suddenly he was a loser in their book. "Good riddance," Dad muttered, like they hadn't just spent months hyping him up. My exes, still trouble in their eyes, no takebacks. The double standard was a slap I couldn't dodge. I tried fighting back once. Caught Ava's crew raiding my stuff. I shoved one of them hard. She fell, screamed, and Ava ran to Mom with a fake limp, claiming I'd attacked them. I got a week of no phone, no friends, while her posse kept coming over, smirking like they'd won. "She's just protective," Dad said, shrugging off my side. Protective of what? Her throne. I was trapped, a punching bag in my own home, and they didn't care. School was my lifeline. Jade and Carlos stuck by me, sneaking me out when Ava's guard was down. I'd vent over greasy fries at a diner in Astoria, sketching my anger into jagged lines. Ava could wreck my dating life, turn our apartment into a war zone. But she couldn't touch that. My people, my art. She'd transferred schools to dodge her past, but I was the one running, dodging her shadow in a city that never slept. I just had to hold on a little longer. Freedom was coming, whether she liked it or not. Senior year was my tipping point. I was 17, grinding through finals at my Jackson Heights High School, dreaming of a life beyond Ava's reach. College was the ticket art school, maybe Pratt or SVA, where I could turn my sketches into something real. Ava had graduated 2 years earlier and enrolled at some no-name community college in Long Island City. Nothing fancy, no scholarships, just a spot Mom and Dad could brag about. They'd shelled out for her tuition, her books, even a shiny new tablet she barely used. Ava's investing in her future, Mom would say, beaming like she'd birthed a genius. Me? I got a different story. Graduation was 6 months away when I brought up college. I'd aced my portfolio review, had teachers pushing me to apply for scholarships. I sat Mom and Dad down one night in our Queen's kitchen. The hum of drones outside, mixing with the TV's X-News feed. I want to go to art school, I said, laying out pamphlets I'd snagged from a fair in Manhattan. Mom's face tightened. Dad didn't look up from his phone. "We can't afford it, Mia," he said, voice flat. "Ava's still in school. We've got to prioritize." Prioritize her, always her. They drained their savings on her mediocre degree, her late-night Ubers home from study sessions, and now I was supposed to wait? "Get a job," Mom added, stirring rice like it was settled. "Maybe after she's done." I'd seen it coming, but it still hit like a brick. Ava wasn't even trying. She'd flunked half her classes, spent more time vaping in Flatbush with her dropout crew than studying. Meanwhile, I'd been busting my ass, pulling As, winning art contests on the sly. They didn't care. I was the backup plan, the one who'd figure it out. That night, I locked myself in our room, her junk still crowding my space, and decided I wasn't waiting for their scraps. If they wouldn't back me, I'd do it myself. I went underground with it. After school, I'd hole up at the library in Corona, hunched over a borrowed tablet, applying for every scholarship I could find. Pratt, SVA, even CUNY's art programs, anything with a grant. Jade and Carlos covered for me, telling Mom I was at group projects when Ava snooped. I aced the SATs, nailed my essays, sent portfolios to judges who didn't know Ava existed. Months later, the email came. Full ride to Pratt Institute, Brooklyn. Tuition, dorm, supplies covered. I'd done it, no thanks to them. I didn't tell Mom and Dad at first. Ava had dropped out by then, flunked too many semesters, came slinking back to Queens with a duffel bag and a sob story. "She'll get back on her feet," Dad said, letting her crash rent-free, eating our food, clogging the bathroom with her vape clouds. I waited till my acceptance was locked, then dropped the bomb. Posted it on X-Public, tagged my school, my friends. Pratt bound, full scholarship. Dreams don't wait. The likes rolled in. Jade retweeted it. Carlos called me a badass. Mom saw it on her phone at work, called me furious. "Why didn't you tell us?" she snapped. "We could have helped." Helped how? By saying no again. Dad just grunted. "Good for you." But his eyes flicked to Ava, sprawled on the couch, like he knew she'd screwed me over one last time. They couldn't stop me now. I'd outmaneuvered their game, public proof I'd won. No room for them to guilt me into staying. Ava didn't say a word. just glared at me over her vape, her college flop hanging like a ghost between us. Move-in day, I packed my sketches, my clothes, and left Queens behind. Pratt's dorms were a gritty paradise Brooklyn noise. Paint-stained halls, kids like me who'd clawed their way up. Mum and Dad didn't offer to help with the move. Ava didn't even look up when I left. I was free, but it wasn't sweet not yet. They'd bet on her, left me to sink, and I'd had to swim alone. Ava was back home, leeching off them, while I built something they couldn't touch. New York stretched out ahead, drones buzzing, subways groaning, and for once, I wasn't the afterthought. I'd earned my shot, and they'd see it play out whether they liked it or not. Pratt was my proving ground. By sophomore year, I'd found my stride, late nights in the studio, hands smudged with paint, turning my anger into murals that won nods from profs. That's where I met Jake. He was a senior, a sculpture major with a loud laugh and a streak of defiance I'd never had. We bonded over a group critique, him mocking the pretentious vibe, me sketching his wild hair in the margins. He was everything I wasn't: bold, confrontational, unafraid to burn bridges. Where I'd spent years swallowing Ava's crap, Jake would have torched it and walked away grinning. We started dating, messy, fun, real, and by junior year he proposed. Not with a ring, just a question over beers in Bushwick. Want to piss off the world with me? I said yes. We set the wedding for summer 2025, right after my graduation. I wanted it back in Queens Jackson Heights, my old turf, not for nostalgia, but for a reckoning. Ava, Mom and Dad had spent my life lifting her up, stomping me down. Now I had Jake, and he saw the score. "Let's make him squirm," he said one night, sprawled on my dorm couch, plotting like it was art. I'd always shrunk from fights. He lived for them. When I told him about Ava, the favoritism, the sabotage, the way they'd probably ruin my day too, he didn't flinch. "We'll flip it," he promised. "Give them what they deserve." Mom and Dad got wind of the engagement through ex-Jade had posted pics of us at a rooftop party, captioned, "Mia's locking it down." They called, all fake cheer, demanding to meet Jake. We dragged them to a diner in Astoria, greasy spoons, flickering hollow menus, the works. Jake played nice, shaking Dad's hand, charming Mom with stories of his metalwork gigs. Then they dropped it. "We'll pay for the wedding." My fork froze mid-bite. They'd never had money for me college, birthdays nada, but now they were flush. "On one condition," Mom added, smiling too tight. "Ava walks down the aisle first, in a dress. It's only fair she's the oldest." Dad nodded like it was noble. Jake's grin didn't waver, but I saw the spark in his eyes. I wanted to scream. My wedding, the one day that was mine, and they still had to shove Ava in front? Jake squeezed my hand under the table, calm as hell. "Sure," he said, smooth as silk. "We'll work it out." They beamed, thinking they'd won, and started rattling off plans, caterers, flowers, a venue in Corona they'd always dreamed of for Ava. I stayed quiet, boiling inside, but Jake was already ahead. Back at my dorm, he pulled out his phone, replaying the diner chat he'd recorded on the sly. "Evidence?" He winked. "They're gonna fund their own downfall." The plan was simple, but brutal. We'd let them pay everything. Jake played along, nodding at their calls, agreeing to their over-the-top picks. A rooftop spot with drone-lit views, fancy fusion tacos, a photographer who'd shot for 10 influencers. They wired deposits, tapped their savings, even took a small loan, all while cooing about Ava's moment. Meanwhile, we booked security, 2 bouncers from a club Jake knew in Williamsburg, cash under the table. Their job, keep Ava out. No dress, no aisle, no scene. We'd let Mum and Dad think it was set, then pull the rug at the last second. I didn't feel bad, not after years of their games. Ava had trashed my childhood, my relationships, my trust, and they'd cheered her on. Now, she'd be the star of nothing, and they'd foot the bill. Jake handled the dirty work, sweet-talking them into pricier options, faking updates about Ava's fitting, while I focused on graduating. Diploma in hand, I'd walk into that wedding, not just a bride, but a victor. Pratt had taught me to build. Jake taught me to destroy. Together, we'd turn their favoritism into a trap. New York buzzed around us, drones overhead, subways below, and for once, I wasn't running from Ava's shadow. I was luring it in, ready to watch it crash. The date was set, the cash was spent, and Mom, Dad, and Ava had no idea what was coming. Jake called it art. I called it justice. The wedding was set for July 2025, a sticky New York summer day where the humidity clung like a second skin. Jake and I had played our parts, letting Mum and Dad pour their money into a rooftop venue in Corona, all glass railings and drone-lit skyline views. They'd gone all out. Fusion tacos from a trendy truck in Flushing, floral arches that cost more than my first semester's books, a photographer who'd shot X campaigns for micro-influencers. Every call, Jake fed their egos. "Ava's gonna love this," he'd say, voice dripping with fake awe while I nodded along, silent, letting them dig their hole. They thought they were scripting a fairy tale. We were staging a takedown. Ava bought it too. She strutted around Queens in the weeks leading up, bragging on X about her big day, posting selfies with a knockoff veil she'd snagged from some thrift dive in Astoria. Mum and Dad egged her on, wiring cash for her dress, a gaudy white thing with too much lace, convinced she'd steal the show. Jake kept them hooked, texting Mum about rehearsals that never happened while I finalized the real plan. The bouncers' two hulks named Tony and Dre, pals from Jake's Williamsburg club days, were briefed. Ava doesn't get in. No exceptions. We'd paid them in cash, slipped under a bar table, and they grinned like it was Christmas. The day came fast. I wore a simple dress, sleeveless, cream, bought cheap from a Brooklyn pop-up nothing to outshine the chaos we'd unleash. Jake rocked a thrift suit, sharp but scruffy, his grin feral. The rooftop buzzed 60 guests, mostly my Pratt crew and Jake's art punks, plus a few cousins who'd caught wind of the plot and RSVP'd just to watch. Mom and Dad arrived early, fussing over details, oblivious. Then Ava rolled up, late as always, in her over-the-top gown, strutting like a queen. She hit the entrance and froze. Tony and Dre stepped up, arms crossed, faces stone. "You're not on the list," Tony rumbled. Ava blinked, laughed, then screeched, "This is my sister's wedding." Mom and Dad rushed over, guests craning necks from the taco line. "What's going on?" Mom yelled, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Jake sauntered up, calm as hell. "Oh, didn't we mention? Ava's not invited." Dad's jaw dropped. "We paid for this," he barked, face red. I stepped forward, voice steady. "You paid for my wedding, not her parade." Ava lunged, clawing at Dre, but he sidestepped, and she stumbled, ripping her hem. Guests gasped. Phones out. X was about to eat this up. Mom panicked, dragging me toward the aisle. "Walk with her, Mia. Fix this," she hissed, like I'd cave. I yanked free, planted my feet. This is my day." Dad grabbed Jake, shouting about agreements, but Jake pulled out his phone, hit play. The diner recording blared Mom's voice, clear. "Ava walks first, in a dress. It's only fair." The crowd murmured, cousins snickering. "Sounds like your idea," Jake said, smirking. "We just didn't sign up for it." Mom stammered, "That's not we didn't, but the guests weren't buying it." Tia Rosa yelled, "Let Mia have her damn wedding." And the tide turned claps, cheers, a few shame on yous aimed at my parents. Ava wailed, mascara streaking, as Tony hauled her back. Mom and Dad chased after her, abandoning me mid-aisle, screaming at the bouncers while the photographer snapped every second. I didn't flinch. Walked myself down. Jade and Carlos flanking me, grinning like wolves. Jake met me at the end, kissed me hard, and the crowd roared. We said our vows under the drone glow, their money burning bright around us, tacos devoured, flowers wilting, all theirs, none for Ava. Mom and Dad stormed out mid-ceremony, dragging her with them, humiliated in front of a sea of phones already posting clips. The reception was ours, music thumping, friends dancing, cousins toasting our genius. Ava's ex went dark. Mom's vague posted some martyr crap that got ratioed fast. They'd spent thousands, lost face, and I'd lost nothing but their chains. Jake clinked his glass to mine, whispering, "Told you we'd flip it." New York sparkled below, and for once, I wasn't the shadow, I was the light. The wedding was the spark. The fallout was the fire. Mom, Dad, and Ava didn't slink away quietly after their rooftop humiliation. They came swinging, but Jake and I were ready. The day after, my phone lit up with texts, Mom's guilt trips. "How could you do this to us?" Dad's threats, "You'll regret this." Ava's rants, "You're a selfish bitch." I didn't respond. Jake took the reins, screenshotting every word and dumping them into a family X group chat. Cousins, TOs, the works. "Thought you'd all like to see their true colors," he posted, pinning the diner recording for good measure. The replies flooded in Tia Rosa's disgraceful, Sophia's fire emojis, even Tio Manny's rare. They got what they paid for. Mom tried to clap back, "You don't understand family," but the group drowned her out. By nightfall, they were muted, blocked, and trending in our little queen's orbit. They didn't stop. Dad showed up at my Pratt dorm 2 days later, banging on the door, yelling about disrespect, until campus security hauled him off. Ava spammed my ex with sob stories, public posts, claiming I'd stolen her moment, tagged with #FamilyBetrayal. Jake countered, dropping a clip of her tantrum at the wedding ripped dress, mascara streaks, the works. "This you?" he captioned. Her followers, mostly bots and pity likes, scattered. The ratio hit her hard. Mom called Jade, begging her to talk sense into me. But Jade just laughed and hung up. They had no leverage, no proof, just their word against a mountain of receipts we'd stacked. We left them in the dust. Jake and I jetted off for our honeymoon, a cheap VR getaway to a simulated Catskills cabin, courtesy of a Pratt Buddies startup. No real travel budget, but it didn't matter. We lounged in hollow forests, toasted with bodega beers shipped to our Brooklyn crash pad, and laughed about the chaos we'd left behind. "They're still seething," Jake grinned, scrolling X for their latest meltdowns. I didn't check, didn't need to. The wedding had been my line in the sand. The honeymoon was my victory lap. Back in New York, the silence grew. Mom and Dad stopped calling after a week, either out of shame or exhaustion. Ava moved out, crashing with some ex-friend in Flatbush, her ex-posts dwindling to vague complaints about toxic people. Word from Sophia was they'd blown through their savings on the wedding, thousands down the drain. No refunds, just a bitter aftertaste. The family cut them off. Clean invites dried up. Group chats went quiet. Tia Rosa told me over coffee and Corona, they made their bed, Mija. Let 'em lie in it. I nodded, sipping my café con leche, feeling the weight lift. I thought about it sometimes, why they'd picked Ava, why I'd been the mistake. Mom used to say Ava was their miracle, born after years of trying, while I'd come unexpected, a surprise they hadn't planned. Maybe that was it, her the dream, me the burden. Or maybe they just loved her louder because she demanded it, and I'd been too quiet to fight. Didn't matter anymore. Reasons were their baggage, not mine. They'd built her a throne, handed me the scraps, and I'd turned it into a weapon. The wedding wasn't just revenge, it was proof I'd outgrown their game. Life moved on. Jake landed a gig welding sculptures for a gallery in Dumbo. I started freelancing, painting murals for cafes and pop-ups across Brooklyn. We rented a tiny loft in Bed-Stuy leaky pipes, buzzing drones outside, but ours, no shadows, no guilt trips. My art took off. Posts of my work caught an influencer's eye, scored me a commission for a Williamsburg bar. Jake framed the first check, hung it by our door. Mia Torres badass. Dad's pride, Mom's excuses, Ava's tantrums. They didn't touch me here. New York didn't care about their drama. And neither did I. The city roared on subways clattering, drones whirring, and I stood taller in it. They could call Ava their miracle all they wanted. I'd made myself the one who mattered. The wedding had cost them everything: money, face, family, and given me a clean slate. Jake clinked his beer to mine one night, grinning. We won. I smiled back, not at the win, but at the peace. They'd lost me long before I'd lost them, and now I was free.